Ladies and gentlemen, it is the 10 past 11 in the morning on Sunday, 24th of September. But as well, today it's the 24th of September, but 5:10 a.m. in the morning in region of the Kiev, Ukraine. And my guest today, he slept for a few hours actually before he came on my show. So his name is Bohdan. Bohdan, welcome to the podcast Live to Battlefield. Thank you for waking up. Thank you for being present here. And, I don't know where to start because it's like, I don't suggest you take any drugs, coffees, and any supplements to stay awake. But let's go crack down, ladies and gentlemen, directly from the Ukraine, 10 past 5 a.m. in the morning. Bohdan, my guest. Bohdan, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor for me. I'm happy that we've recorded an episode a week ago, and I'm excited to see how
you're gonna do the well.
I've never been as a guest, so you're
gonna do very well. Listen,
yeah.
I know that it's early in the morning, and there's something what's called sacrifice, and I truly believe there's a big difference between sacrifice and struggling. And you sacrificing to be this morning. Tell me why you are sacrificing, how much you're sacrificing in your life. Before we dig into this thing, who is the Bohdan? Tell us difference why.
Yeah, well, I just seem to have understood a long time ago that nothing valuable and powerful and beautiful comes without some sort of necessity to give something up, and it's, my life just happened to be in a certain way which made me understand that long time ago. And obviously, this is the kind of thought, to people, whoever's going to watch and listen, it might seem like a rather primitive and simple thing. It's not a big deal. Oh, look at this guy having to wake up at 4 a.m. to record such an amazing episode. But considering the lifestyle that I've been lately having, it's...
Can you share with us, who is the Bohdan and what is his
his
lifestyle? Because, ladies and gentlemen, a week ago, I was on a Bohdan podcast, and let me tell you, that speaks the volume of a person who is willing 5 o'clock in the morning to be awake, to be the guest, to have the guest, and talk to you guys. So look at Bohdan. Who's the Bohdan, and what the lifestyle you having actually?
Oh, it's a great question, and I've been journaling lately a lot, and by lately I mean probably latest couple of years. I don't know if you're into journaling, but with me it's been on and off, but it's mostly been on. And when I journal, I tend to ask this fundamentally important question, and who am I appears to be one of those questions. So who I am, it's, I'm everything and I'm nobody at the same time. I want to believe in that sort of way. I am what I do, whether you like this kind of fiction films. There was a film that I saw many years ago, and the main character said, it's not what you think, something along the lines, it's not what you think that defines you, it's what you do that defines you. So I am what I do. It's not what I believe, it's not what I've done, it's not what I plan to do, it is what I do on a permanent basis. Yeah, so I am completely and utterly defined by my actions. Repeated, routinous, mundane, boring actions. And I tend to find certain peace in a thought like that, because I believe that your past could have been tricky. Your future is not given, especially considering my location. But it is exactly what you do in the present, day by day, that truly defines you and gives you peace. Because people tend to lose themselves, in my opinion, and we need to reinvent ourselves. I think it's part of being a human. You've got to have the ability, of that probably better than anybody else. I'm aware of that the ability to reinvent yourself and to readapt is one of the most critically important skills. So, I've happened to reinvent myself quite a few times.
When you say you are reinvented yourself, what did you become? Sorry, what have you been before that you need to reinvent yourself, and into what? And what prompts you to reinvent yourself?
That's a lovely question. It appears that in life, life just happens to you. It throws all kinds of stones at you, so to speak. So to give you an example, it's like with your idols, for instance. You used to, at least that's what happened with me quite often. I found myself in the past kind of following a certain path, having certain pattern of thoughts, and looking up to certain people. And then particular events happen, whether that be war or whether that be, as simple as reading a new book or watching another film, because I believe people consist of different puzzles. It's quite complicated, I feel like, to be truly authentic. And when people say be authentic, yeah, it's definitely right. You've got to aspire to be your true self. But then, every single word that we say, every thought that we tend to wrestle with could be a byproduct of somebody else. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but it's like if you analyze a language part, and that's what they do in linguistic universities, they make you watch somebody, listen to somebody so often you start literally to mock this person, because that is in the future supposedly helping you to establish a better accent and speak a little bit faster. So I believe we are all, we depend on each other and we get inspired by each other and we make certain conclusions. So yeah, I mean, my role models have changed, my patterns of behavior have changed. I've had to, well, sometimes, when I write a journal, I'll be honest with you, maybe it's going to sound a little bit whiny, maybe call it whatever, but sometimes I've got to like literally support myself. And it's not that I don't have support from my mother, from my girlfriend, but sometimes I literally got to write something like, yo, you got it, man, you got to keep going, you're the man, and stuff like that. So I don't know how that comes off, but it's the tumultuous life that sometimes happens to you.
Do you know that questions, asking so many questions, once upon a time was considered blasphemy, and the Spanish Inquisition will put you, will crucify you if you ask so many questions, and if you ask yourself the origin, who am I? And I think that this is the most powerful question we all can ask, who am I? And you ask this very well. In contrary, majority people, I would say 90% of the people will go with that flow, but you dare to challenge your life. You dare to challenge yourself to ask this question.
Yeah.
But, your English is perfect, and you were the English teacher. So,
thank you.
Wow, how did you become that English teacher?
Oh, that's an interesting story. I am asked question of this kind quite often, and when I look back, to me it appears almost mysterious. I always like to repeat to my students that back in my active studying era of English, I never felt like I learned something from scratch, from zero. It always felt like I am rediscovering it. So make whatever out of it. Some probably a bit more like, let's say, mystery oriented people would put it into some past life category. I don't know if I necessarily believe in that, but yeah, there was a lot of feelings like, oh wow, so that's what it is, when I was studying this grammar patterns and rules and vocabulary. I mean, I can take pride honestly in saying that what I've been observing with a lot of young people is they take on a path which is the path of less resistance, and the path that's been given to them by their parents, by their role models. Not saying that this is always wrong. I mean, I believe education systems exist for a reason. And the fact that you've got to go to kindergarten, then to school, then to college/university, then to work. With a lot of people call it the metrics, a lot of people call it slavery, whatever. And sometimes it might be so, but sometimes when a person is particularly lost, it is of a great necessity to have a certain strategy and certain pattern of action. So sometimes I believe it's useful. It never was my case, let me tell you. It was never my case, because I was just, I think, intellectually and financially terribly incapable of going to university. So university was just not on my plate. But I'm grateful to myself that when the time came, particularly around graduation of my school, I sat down in silence and I asked myself an honest and reasonable question. And that was what the fuck I want to do, in the future.
No, it's okay. Feel free. Express yourself. It's 5 o'clock in the morning in your place, and you need to let on your system.
Yeah, I'm allowed. So I asked myself that question, and I didn't notice, to my surprise, a lot of other people asking questions like that. Everybody seemed to have somehow already know what they want to do. And for me, it was critically important. And maybe, again, it was the influence of the internet, because ever since I jumped on board of the internet, I was into something kind of developing, kind of self-discipline, growing. Some sort of proclamation seems to have always existed in me. So I had previously read certain self-development books, And for some reason, back in that time, I was really into the Beatles. You know, I sort of fell off this wagon for now. I'm into different type of music, but yeah, like watching John Lennon interviews. And I had a great friend of my life, the best friend of mine, who unfortunately passed away. He was a big Beatles fan. And at that point, we would just have a lot of really meaningful, thoughtful conversations. And that's what prompted me. That's what led me to sitting back and asking myself, what was this one thing that I have always naturally liked? And then I looked back to my childhood, and there it was, you know, English. Whatever I saw some kind of different text written in English, like, was interesting what that could mean. Back when I had this cassette player, you know, and I would listen to different records. Yeah. Well, it's not as old as what was that, like a vinyl? I believe back in the day, vinyls used to be more popular, right? Yeah, and I'm heartbroken that I'm never on the vinyl player. I'm thinking of.
You remind me of my son. He bought himself even the what's it called, the Walkman. Oh. And I said to him, I said like, Mateo,
oh shit, nice.
You know, I skip at some period in my life as well. I want to have the Walkman, then happen 90s, happen war to me and all these things. But then CD comes. It's like, oh yeah, you know. Then suddenly USB. Then suddenly there's no CDs, there's no vinyls. And look, there is some type of charm, and I'm encouraging you to. So guys, let's go help my friend Bohdan. Everybody who can supply maybe a Bohdan with some old vinyl LP and a gramophone, feel free, you know, contact him. I'm going to put the comment section how you can contact Bohdan. So Bohdan, the English, it's obviously, you know, you have an interesting story about this one, and I think we all drawn into that arena of, you know, people call them matrix, but I must say that we cannot all run some successful business or, you know, being online gurus or whatever the list goes on. But one thing it is that we need education, and you clearly displaying something what most of people will ignore. For example, Gary Vee. Gary Vee is the biggest, a hypocrite in my life. You know, I mean, he writes the books, but tell the people don't read, don't go to school, but buy my book. You know, I mean, it doesn't make a sense. I always say something for myself. 2 questions I have for you. First of all, it's who is your idol you growing up, and who is your idol now? Let's go start with this one. You mentioned this at the beginning that you changed your idols, and who is now, and why would you change?
Right. Yeah, I just wish my students had been asking questions like that. To be honest, I'm enjoying being a guest as well. Trust me, my friend. Yeah. To be honest, I gotta hop on podcasts more often. You know, screw having a podcast. I better be a guest. I think that's a more efficient, I guess, strategy. Yeah, it's beautiful. You would have to probably specify the category, because I feel like for different categories, different types of actions that I regularly perform, there would have to be different people. But that being said, I do recall a student of mine nearly 4 or 5 years ago asking me a question like that. And I am ashamed of the question that I had given back in that day. You know what? Because I was asked that question and I said Joe Rogan. Because believe me or not, that guy contributed greatly to my English. But now, since the time passed and I've matured, and you would say that 5 years is better than nothing, but now I can wholeheartedly say that he is my mother.
Okay.
You know? I remember my student asking me a follow-up question at that time, and he said, well, I'm a bit surprised that you said Joe Rogan. Shouldn't it be like your parents or your great parents or something like that? And I was like, man, what are you talking about? Look at Joe Rogan, all cool and shit, running best podcast, looking big, muscular, tattoos and shit. And now a lot of things have happened. I've become much closer with my family, which is just like my nearest family is only my mother. And I say that there are idols and paragons to which you look up constantly on a daily basis and you literally copy them, but there are also the second kind of people that they are perhaps just staying around you, and everything that they do and say somehow indirectly powerfully influences you, and you are able of noticing this influence only after a certain time, only after you've reached certain point in development, I believe, in of your character. So yeah, undeniably I'm very close with my mother, and she's the strongest one.
See, this is interesting enough. You know, we all looking for the role models somewhere outside, right? And I must say, I'm not excluded either. Like for me, was when I was growing up, the Bruce Lee, then Superman and all these things, and then Rambo, and list goes on. But as an older I become, actually, I realized that my role model was actually my grandfather, because that's the man I grew up with. So I appreciate this very much. However, Mr. Joe Rogan, I'm gonna tag you here. I want you to give the chance to give the Bogdan time on your podcast because I think that's something he deserves.
That would be nice. Although, admittedly, I am not that common of a listener anymore. In the lights of recent events, a lot of things have changed in my attitude towards Joe Rogan, and in fact towards a lot of his gang. Because I'm grateful to his podcast to introducing me to different people that I now follow on Instagram, and I tend to take something from each of them.
That's a good one. So second, my question, well, first one was the idols, but second one, it's the books, right? I can't talk about books right now because when I was growing up and, I was more interested in fighting and stealing from the shops and, doing all these stupid things. And school was for me, not even secondary, not even on a third place, was like, don't exist because school was something stupid. And then I fall in love. I remember I fall in love with one woman and she was an opera singer. First, I have the girlfriend. She was a ballet dancer, then opera singer. But this woman called me to come watching some operetta. I forgot. Like I think it's Barbarian Sevilla or something. And I start crying at the beginning. I couldn't understand like why I'm crying. Like this is opera. I make fun of everybody. Reading the books, going to theaters, all these things. And then I realized that I'm missing one biggest human connection with the life, and that's the books, experience from the past, present, and future. Mm-hmm. However, I'm grateful that on my interview on your podcast show, ladies and gentlemen, in the comment section below, just go down and click on Bohdan Podcast, give him support, thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I noticed behind you, Colonia, Stephen King, and all these books. So tell me, what the books are for you in today's DNA age when everybody's listening books, nobody wants to read anymore. What the books for you are and why reading the books even today?
I'm going to give you a rather unexpected,
I
would say.
Feel free. Hit me up.
I was having a conversation with a student of mine the other day, and we were talking about, it was in the context of psychedelics. And we started talking how different people just do not qualify to take psychedelics. And he dropped this title, escapist. And an escapist, as far as I can judge, is a person who tends to mitigate the reality, kind of escape at time to time. I would be lying if I told you that books is not an escape from reality. It pretty much is for me quite often the escape from reality. However, as somebody also said, I can't. Oh, it must have been John Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings author. He said, "Oh no, sorry, I'm wrong. It was this author. He was a big Christian author, and he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia." C.S. Lewis.
Oh yeah, I forgot the name, but I know what it is. Like Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah, so he must have said something like the only people who do not want to escape are in prison, something along those lines. The only people that can't escape the reality are in prison. So it appears to me that it's fairly all right to escape your reality time to time. So in that matter, books do serve me a cause to escape my reality, but to rather enlarge my reality, enrich my reality. Yeah, and besides, it's just the shortest, most effective way to increase your eloquency and simply sound better, more powerfully, more convincing, because language is a superpower. I've always said it, will never be tired of repeating it. Language is a way of influencing, it's the shortest way how you can affect people.
They say the three things in life you can return: the time, the actions, and the words spoken. And the words can be the weapons if you put enough emotions in them. Mm-hmm. For that one, I congratulate you for explaining this to our students. Now, let's go into now our reality right now, today time. You live in a country which is now torn apart. Can you tell us, guide us, who is the living witness there, right? And nobody can explain better than somebody who lives in that country. Mm-hmm. Last year, February 23rd, I think was 23rd. Was invasion happened to the Ukraine. What happened to you? What happened to people? What happened to Ukraine? Can you guide us a little bit? Your perception, your views on a war in Ukraine.
Well, I'd say two things happened. Psychologically, we were stripped away of our previous beliefs, and we were called to We were brought back to reality, majority of Ukrainians. So that's in terms of psychological impact. And obviously in terms of physical safety, that is arguably the biggest factor there, because undeservedly too many people have died, too many women have been raped, too many children have been deported, illegally taken abroad. And when I think about, in the first days of this invasion, I remember seeing a video of this Chechen battalion that crossed the border and illegally came to one of our cities, must have been Mariupol, where the Azovstal battalion is based, the so-called Nazis, called by the Russians, that there are obviously plenty more Nazis on their side than ever been on our side. And there was a video of those guys, these Chechen idiots, and they were recording videos kind of bragging about coming in the city, and you could clearly distinguish a woman's cry somewhere in the background. And, I still remember the video, and it's something, you can't get over something like that easily. You get traumatized, but what can I say about myself being traumatized? I wasn't even there, I wasn't even there. So what can you say about those people that had to be the direct victims of these monsters? And you just wake up when, like the way how it happened to me in the central parts of Ukraine. I woke up in the early morning because the walls of the house were shaking, and it's a miracle that my windows withstand whatever impact was, because first they decided to hit the critically important infrastructures, which they have ever been doing since, with questionable success, obviously, no least thanks to our soldiers and the brave people. And every time in the first days you could see on the TV the unbelievable examples of simple people's bravery, their toughest decision to go and take the weapon, which was given away for free in first days. Whoever wanted, whoever understood that they could use and carry the weapon was given a piece. And by the way, obviously, pretty quickly the Russians kind of used that, and they said, oh, look at them, now Ukraine is giving away weapon to left and right. Yes, because if we hadn't been doing that, if there wasn't an AK sticking from each window when the Russian battalions were crossing the borders, who knows if I'd be sitting currently talking to you. So whatever is happening, this bit of peace that I am in right now, it's exclusively due to the bravery of soldiers and simple people as well. And it's just, it's like coming back to the topic of idols. You can look up to something, you can read a book, but then look around you, take a look at the examples of bravery and power that are happening around me. I'm surrounded by heroes. I've discovered so many interesting people right now that I had never even known existed, like soldiers, truly educated, powerful, inspiring people. You don't need anybody like Joe Rogan to find your example.
Can you share with us, with us, everybody in the West, including myself, regardless of my experience with the war, everybody tried to give, how to say this, not directly to you in Ukraine, but I say, across the globe, there's so many influential, inspirational speakers who try to motivate you, me, and everybody else. But a lot of this is a bullshit artist, right? I can say this and I'm glad that you said this very interestingly, because I truly believe, guys, you need to go on a Bohdan podcast, give him support, thumbs up, like, and comment and share. He has a very interesting guests and a very interesting topics and conversations, but nobody can from US actually inspire you except yourself in this country. So how do you find inspiration when you talk to these people? And who is this unsung, ordinary, everyday heroes around you who you talking and make your life safer or better?
Quite surprisingly, a lot of people have told me that when the war had only started, and we should call it rather the full-fledged invasion, because the war started arguably a long time ago, but it's only a year and a half since the war has been ramping up in the active phase. And a lot of people told me that, strangely, the guys who had displayed the most courage and bravery and discipline prior to the war were very last people to apply to
Okay.
the enlistment office. And that's actually what I think
Yes.
me and you discussed on your podcast, right? You mentioned something that, and that's exactly the case. And if you ask me to give you certain names, I probably wouldn't even be able, because these are occasional interviews with simple soldiers, and they had been pretty much
Yes.
anonymous
Yes.
before the war started, and they remain so to a certain degree. So there are these silent heroes upon whose shoulders the whole world is laying, and they're just silently, routinely, mundanely keep performing their tasks to the best of their abilities. And we just have to be grateful to Defense Forces of Ukraine. And I know you've got quite an audience, and to those who are going to listen, my message in the context of the war would be pretty short and simple. Whatever narrative you guys keep hearing from the Russian side, however appealing and logical and reasonable and counter maybe mainstream that might occur, make absolutely no mistake. This is either provocation or delusion. It can never be so. Whoever, when the bottom line must be this: you've got to stay away from any Russian citizen or source of information to the best of your ability.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. I like it you say this.
I mean, they might sound friendly. They might push this topics of, oh, I'm against war, I'm against that. I actually don't support this. As long as you keep living in Russia, you keep paying the taxes, you keep supporting the war. That's period. There shouldn't be anything, what about this, what about that? There's no what about it in this context. That's it. So whether what should happen to Russia is even up to me to discuss. I'm not an economist, I'm not a politician, I'm not even a soldier. So the only thing I can attest to with my own experience is that these are tricky, wild people, and
can I share something with you? Like I want it for your friends and everybody in Ukraine to understand one thing. When the war happened in Yugoslavia and Croatia was invaded by the Federal Army and the Serbian forces, everything else, I do remember the ladies in my basement, they were praying. Before the shelling started, they were praying on the street and in basements. And I could understand these women praying, it's like, who are you praying to God? And, the prayers was like always, the God sees everything. And, inside of me as a soldier, I was always that negative approach to everything. I just want to destroy everything. I have enough of enemy destroying my city and my country. But the history, it's undisputably always correct. And that is that every invader, sooner or later, will fall down. Doesn't matter how strong it is. Doesn't matter how big it is. Doesn't matter what we say. Invaders never stayed on the power. It's collapsed society. Second World War, Hitler. First World War, the Austrian monarchy. Napoleon. Just name it. Just name a few. Tutankhamun. And Nefertiti and all this. Try to invade. The Julius Caesar and all invaders collapse sooner or later. But tell me, how this war actually, in this situation, influencing you day to day, your life, I want to say something as well to you. You have the balls, my friend. In the world we live in, everybody goes in fancy gyms. You do exercises at home. And guys, I want you to go. I'm going to put Bohdan Instagram account. I want you to see it. I want you to give him support. So, how this influencing your life as a person, as a lecturer, on your students? And
Tell
everything?
you what, last winter blackouts started happening. I was unprepared to those blackouts. This is just a nature of humans, of certain humans. And obviously, luckily, there are people who can foresee certain events and they are always prepared. That's not my case. I wait until the very last minute and then I'm adapting.
Yes.
That's back to what I said in the beginning. Yeah. So then, I wait, I'll be like, maybe it's be all right. Maybe it's going to be all right. And then, bam, it's not all right. And then I have to adapt. So last winter, cold as hell in my house. You exhale some air, the steam is coming out of your mouth. That's how crazily cold it was. Dark as hell, no electricity, no power, no heat, no nothing. You know what the hell I was doing? Fucking lifting the weights in my home gym that I had built. I had no options. I was always asking myself a question: will I be proud at the end of the day to know that I have missed my training session? Or will I be proud to know that I had put myself through this suffering, this self-imposed suffering? Self-imposed suffering is amazing because it teaches you.
Can you expand on this one? What do you mean? Prepares you, teaches you. Guys, I want you to take a pen and paper. Oh, sorry. Well, yeah, pen and paper. You can take your iPad and the pen. I'm using pen and paper. I'm old school, but I want you to take a pen and paper metaphorically, and I want you to take a notes from today's session. This is like you have a free master session. So like guide us, Bogdan. Seriously. You have the full right to say credibility and authority. You live in a country is bombed, shelled, critical infrastructure. Last year, I spoke to some of my friends here. So like, look, I know even in war in Yugoslavia, we didn't have that things, that critical infrastructure being destroyed. We always have electricity somehow. But, share with us, teach us, please, Bogdan.
To me, self-imposed suffering can occur in multiple shapes and forms. I want to take a reasonable approach into categorizing certain areas and aspects of my life and asking myself an honest question: what is there more? What else can I implement in certain areas? So whatever it is, make sure, that's what I keep repeating to myself, that you become more and more excellent in whatever you're constantly doing. Everybody plays the same game. Sometimes the reason why I take melatonin, which is some kind of a sleeping hormone, because I can't fall asleep peacefully at night, it's not because the rocket is flying above me. It's not because there's a air raid going off and I'm in permanent danger of death. That's part of that. But it's also my thoughts, my mind, because I sometimes can't fall asleep thinking of how many things I could have already achieved. And I think about the endless potential. And this is a constant feeling that's been present in me. What is it called? FOMO, I think it's called FOMO, the fear of missing out. I've been having this fear for forever, because whatever I have achieved in my life, whether that be a decent job with no prior education whatsoever, whether that be some kind of physical achievement that I've reached, that I've had, it was all done by me exclusively for myself. Yet, that being said, I also do not believe in a term called self-made. I don't believe anybody is self-made, because whatever you're going through, whatever you're achieving, there will always be people around you.
I like it.
Right? And
Please
there will
continue.
always be support. Right. And even if there isn't, well, whose fault is that? Somebody said that whatever happens to a man, man's responsibility is something like whatever he's done and whatever has been done to him. So even those things that just have happened to me, that weren't like my will, I am still responsible for them, because at the very end, I'm responsible for what I make out of those events. And that's Viktor Frankl, Man's Search of Meaning. You may have heard this book by I don't remember the country of his origin, but he's the guy who went through a concentration camps in fascist Germany.
He's been mentioned him
so
lately quite a lot. I hear that this is like my third or fourth time this week, the day Sunday, I heard his name is mentioning, because he was talking like, doesn't matter what they did to me, they couldn't take my will and to think and better things, a better life. But you said something very, 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 very powerful. And I want every of you guys, I want you to take a note about this one. This is the guy who sits in Ukraine. He doesn't sit in New York or in Sydney with me in a nice coffee shop. People don't understand, and they're never going to understand, because they never lived in your life. It's 5:30 in the morning, 5:40 in the morning in Ukraine. It's going to be sunrise. It's autumn, actually. First day of autumn, yesterday. He says you are not a self-made person, and that is absolutely right. That's the biggest BS I ever heard as well in my life, telling me I'm the self-made millionaire. No, you're not. But why, Bogdan, you are taking your life on a further and start doing your podcasting? Why podcasting?
I am okay with copying people. I have never seen a problem with being inspired by others. And since I have been listening to podcasts myself quite commonly, often, it would be just simply a shame for me not to have started anything like that. And a funny thing is that I attempted to start a podcast back in 2018, a bunch of years ago, and I had even recorded an episode with a friend of mine, but it was so cringy and primitively done that I just thought, nah, no way I'm releasing it. No way I'm releasing it. And funny thing is that now, since it's been started and I have some sort of a small audience, I'm thinking, man, had I only started it back in 2018 normally, the way I should have, who knows how many subscribers I would have had by 2023, So that should tell you something. Like, whatever cringy, like, I never re-listen to my episodes. I know I should. I know it's a good practice, but it's just soul wrecking. It takes my soul out of my body to listen to my voice and the kind of shitty questions that I form sometimes. But it's like, yeah, man, it would be just, it's a primitive and trivial phrase to say that the only better time is right now, and it's truly so. Had only I started back in 2018, and that applies to everything. I always keep reminding myself, had only I started making my current income a couple of years later, had only I made the decision to renovate my house the way I'm doing it right now a couple of years later, had only I become this and that. And the funny thing is, like, there are so many guys, so many men particularly around me, that just happen to be in a better condition, and I directly tell them into their faces, I say, look at you, son of a bitch, you were born in a full family. Your father had always provided for you. What you had to do is just not to be a lazy bitch, and get your life together when you were 17, 18, 19. Instead of look at if I had been born in a perfect condition, or at least to say a better, significantly better condition, currently I would have been so much far away from them. But in my case, I've got to catch up with them, and then I've got to speed them up. I've got to become even better, because catching up with somebody ain't an option. I would never be okay with just being another guy. Like I've told my girlfriend and all of my students, I say, listen, I got 4 years to build the best house, at least on my street. If not on my town, at least on my street. I don't give a fuck. I'm grinding. I'm working my ass off. Partly doing a podcast is what contributes to it, because I don't mean to make any income from my podcast. I know realistically that's not on my radar, maybe next 5 years, whatever, if things go well. But it just builds my discipline. I do not exercise because I need big muscles, that as well. But I exercise because of what that does to my mind, primitively and simply as it is. Just pushing yourself, doing what you don't want to do, but doing like you love it. That's what Mike Tyson said. Because I know I'm going to need that mindset. I'm going to need that reminder. I'm going to need to one morning wake up and remember that, hey, remember how you pushed yourself when nothing felt right? So you can do it right now.
I use my pen and paper, so I make it quite a lot of quick notes. One of these is catch my mind straight away. You say something. I don't exercise to have the biggest muscles, but exercise my discipline. Then you say, like, in 4 years' time, I don't want to have the best house in my city, but in my street at least. I'm grinding. How long are you doing podcasting?
Since January. Okay. It's been
statistically speaking, there's a 3.5 million podcasts they registered globally right this very moment. Only 650,000 are active, and only from 650,000 podcasters, only 5+ episodes. The most maybe 200,000, because people after 5th episode drop down. Don't hit your head very hard, Bohdan, for one simple reason. When was the lockdowns and all these COVID things, everybody was sitting at home, binging on food on the TV, and everybody's become expert in podcasting. That time is gone. Your persistence is going to pay it off. And I'm inviting everybody, guys. I want you to come on a Bohdan podcast. Down in the comment section below, there's a details how you can access to his podcast and give him support. And as well, I'm inviting all you guys to call him to become your guest, and vice versa on his podcast and him on your podcast. But doesn't matter how much time I'm gonna ask you this question, you know what I mean? But tell me, how do your day looks like in daily life in Ukraine? You know what I mean? Okay, apart Mario wakes you up 5 o'clock in the morning to do podcast. But how the daily life look like?
The rather happy part of my day. Yeah, it would strongly depend on the region where you are, where any Ukrainians are. Luckily, I must confess, there are still regions that have, again, luckily, miraculously, never been hit. And whether it's because Russians have been using terribly outdated maps, it's a funny story. It's actually reportedly, I can't fully attest to that, but they say that one of the reasons, arguably the biggest reason why my town was never occupied, although they came pretty close, they came something within 10 kilometers away from my own house. They got pretty close. But arguably one of the reasons is because their maps had been so shitty, outdated, that they had chosen the way that had not existed for a long time, so they just simply got lost. Yeah, that speaks to their professionalism. They'd been using some of those Soviet maps,
built in 70s and 80s,
gathering dust for. So that's crazy. They just got totally lost, and that's it. So that would have to depend on where you currently are. In my particular case, things are relatively peaceful, but that has two sides. I feel like living close to the capital city, it's got pros and cons. Pros, well, so the advantages being that it's definitely the most protected city in the whole country. If the capital falls, mayhem occurs. That's the city where the president is, the office is, the parliament is. That's the most important city. The downside of that is that it's also the most targeted city. So that has always been their priority, right? They have always openly stated that Kiev is the Bankova street where president is. It's been always their target. In fact, it's not only been Ukrainian office that they have threatened. They have threatened a couple of European capitals as well, famously publicly, and that is crazy. That speaks a lot to what's been happening in Ukraine, because I do hear time to time this American narratives that maybe we've got to concentrate a little bit more on our problems, maybe we've got to decrease the financial support that's been given. And to that, I would love to tell to all my American friends, maybe somebody perchance listens to my podcast on the channel, somebody I'm sure going to listen to this episode. If you are American citizen and you obediently pay taxes, and part of that money of yours goes to Ukrainian soldiers who sacrifice their life with the blood on their hands, protect their land, and also potentially protecting good parts of Europe, if not the whole Europe, directly or indirectly also protecting your country. Well, to me, it would have been much better to just work, do my job, pay my taxes, and make sure that my country lives in peace, and make sure that other countries live in peace. If America claims to be the great, and I'm talking about America specifically because whether we like it or not, they have helped us the most, probably supporter number one to Ukraine. If America claims to be the greatest country on planet Earth, as they always claim to be, the country of possibility, American dream and all this thing, if the American citizen clearly and truly claim to be so, well, they have to live up to their words, and supporting, standing out against aggressor, protecting the weaker against the stronger, just standing out for democracy and freedom is what, in my eyes, is what it means to be the greatest country on planet Earth, whether that's true or not. And also, a lot of American civilians, they tend to forget about the so-called Budapest Memorandum. I don't know if you've heard about that, where Ukraine gave up the third largest atomic nuclear potential, military complex. We just gave it up in exchange for promises of security, so to speak. There were countries like the United States, the UK, as far as I remember, Russia included. We gave our third nuclear weapon complex in terms of size for the promises, for contract of safety. And then when one of the countries that signed that document is directly breaking the agreement, the contract, as well as a couple of other international agreements that Russia just never paid attention to, well, then it's your direct responsibility to stand out and to live up to your promise and stick to your promise of international agreements. So again, if I was an American, if my government is paying taxes to support a weaker country that's been illegally, unjustifiedly invaded, I'd be all down. It's much better for me to sit in my office or in my room, work, get my money, send half of my money, and make sure that I'm in relative, safety.
Look, people forget it. People forget
I don't know if that's answered your question.
People forget the past and history of Ukraine. Ukraine has been, under submission of the Russia for decades, and there was a lot of being done by Russians to exterminate the Ukrainians. What the 1930s, that big famine, and the list goes on. And plus, Second World War,
Yeah.
the Russians didn't fought very much, the Second World War, but the Ukrainians was the majority. Those
It was Ukrainians
that's
mostly
that's
who
a fact.
died.
People can't ignore this one of the most biggest and bloodiest battles in the Second World War were done in Ukraine. Where a lot of people are suffered on both sides. But Bogdan, what is your dream? What do you want to achieve? Tell us, what is a Bogdan dream before we let you go to sleep a little bit, because it's going to be 6 o'clock soon.
Let me tell you, I don't see myself living abroad. I will never leave my motherland. My dream, currently I have this tunnel vision. I'm quite laser focused on having the greatest condition where I currently live, the greatest of all possible condition. That means having a nice garden, having a luxurious house, having a place where I can possibly bring children to, there are certain demons inside of me that whisper in my ears, then I have to compensate for everything that I never had in my childhood, and that's okay, because part of being a man is proven to your childhood demons.
I love it. This
right,
I like it. This seriously.
Yeah.
You know what? You have the hallmark of the honesty, and you say this it's in.
Oh yeah.
I'm very grateful having you today. So sorry.
It is, yeah. So that's it. Whatever I didn't have, whatever I wasn't privileged having back in my childhood, whatever I needed, I want to get it, and I want to get more. And I'm pretty honest about that. I've got financial opportunity right now. The only thing that it takes me is just some grind, hard work. That's only things that help. So instead of frittering your money away left and right, blowing it to some horseshit, which I am quite, I have proclamation to blow some money for nothing.
You're not only one, it's forgiven, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Sometimes everybody has their vice, right? You've got to have your downsides. So yeah, blowing money away, sometimes it's pretty appealing, but I'm privileged with having a decent job. I'm privileged. I'm grateful to all of my students, even the dumbest ones. They never seem to listen to me, but they still seem to return, time to time. No matter how much I bully and disrespect them directly in their face, they do take a lot of lessons out of whatever I say. And I'm privileged of having a lot of them that I can pay my bills thanks to them. I'm not that cheap by Ukrainian standard per lesson price. So that's what I'm doing, improving where I currently live. My home is my castle. I want to build a real castle.
What it is about you. Sorry to interrupt. This is something what most people don't understand. You didn't do Crimea River and fly overseas and give up on your country, on your homeland.
Oh, hell no.
You are there, 85 kilometers far away from the Kiev, which is the prize, the jewel in for the Russians, and you never know but they're gonna start bombing even more and all these things. You are there, you try to bring your kids, you say family, and do things. For that, I salute you, Bogdan, and I really wish everybody who is listening this today and watching this podcast, I really want you to pay attention to Bogdan dreams, so let's go help him to achieve this. It's gonna be great experience for all of us, for somebody who is there, is a part of the defending entire world. Look, after all, I said to you in my podcast, we can all wear the weapons, and we can all go in the war fighting this and this. The wars happen for everybody different ways, but I said the fear of being bombed and shelled every day. It is absolutely something I'm terrified. And I know that what you're going through. It's not simple, but I want to say that you showed nothing less than courage and bravery today in this interview. And I will make it sure that this is what we wrote it about. I don't go to the gym every day just to make a big muscle, but discipline. This is the best thing ever heard. Honestly, in such a long time. And I think
I started thinking strategically, to be honest. I stopped thinking short term and I started thinking long term. Each and every training session, I tend to have sometimes 2 of them per day. And I walk and I run and I have a lot of lessons every day. And I also need to sleep occasionally. And I think strategically. And let me just add one more thing, because I've been wrestling with this thought, if I'm allowed. You mentioned that living in a constant fear and being... That is undeniable part of that, for sure. As shortly as couple of nights ago, I am awakened in the middle of the night. Everybody knows the story. I've told this story. I'm awakened in the middle of the night because of this increasing sound of a rocket. It wasn't the sound of a drone, because I could distinguish, you know, I believe every Ukrainian can. It was the sound of a rocket, and the closer it got to my current location, the more whistling it became. And when it whistles, it is exactly the moment you understand that it's either gonna fly away or it's gonna hit. You know, it's either one of those. But let me tell you something. After that rocket flew away, you know what then happened to my mind? I felt the love to my modeling like I had never experienced before. You know, the appreciation for my relative safety and appreciation for this piece of land. And I don't even like working in the land. I got a garden, I got a yard. I'm not that kind of farmer type of guy who would be, you know, but just the fact, you know, that I was born in this particular piece of land and that it belongs to me, and that so many people have spread their blood there, you know, just to protect their piece of land. And when that rocket flew away, I was the happiest person in the world, I'm telling you. And that's one thing that a lot of people a lot of Ukrainians, I don't disrespect, criticize anybody. Sometimes I do, but who am I to judge anybody? You know, that's one thing that a lot of Ukrainians that are currently abroad will never be able to understand. I will never be able to understand the story of somebody who's lost their father, mother, husband, wife, sister that had to go away. So I'm not speaking on that behalf. I know everybody's got a different story, and I respect that. But, you know, being in your rightful land, laying in your rightful bed, being ridiculously grateful and appreciative of that rocket not hitting your house, and cherishing, respect and appreciating your life much more than you had ever done before, that's what war is doing. So you see, there are two sides to it.
I think, as I said, like, I think you should start writing the blog, you know what I mean? Not about war, but the war as emotions. You see, people always make mistakes about war. Like, I'm saying this from my experience. And I never understood the people who fled Croatia during the conflict, and then, you know, they come back and everything else. But I don't blame them, because it's like most of these people I know that they did because they did it. And my opinion about many men that actually they show the true colors, you know what I mean, the cowardness. I talk about men in my case. That was 1991. So, you know, being in your bed and you think that you are safe, nobody's safe. In a war, nobody's safe. Because one thing I learned in a war, that bullet never discharge, you know, accidentally, but discharge, you know, and kill somebody, you know what I mean, when you least expect it. So for that one, I want everybody to take it, as I say again, pen and paper. I want you to listen very carefully what Bohdan shared with us today. This is the inspiration which you take and absorb and convert into your motivation, how to live your life. Perhaps you don't need to wake up in the morning with the sound of the engines or the rockets or the drone. But life has as a Bohdan said, throws you different balls and different curves. And you need to be prepared. Even Bohdan is not always prepared for everything he says, because you can't be prepared for everything. You can't.
Tell you that though, this winter I'm a bit more prepared. This time I'm stocked up on generators, batteries. Ain't no way them fucking Russians getting me off guard again. No fucking way. No way I'm sitting in darkness.
No, we don't want to. We want your podcast be run up and down. Now, guys, I want you to call the Bohdan.
Yes,
Bohdan, how the people can best contact you, find you, and, you know, talk to you?
Yes, so it is first of all Bohdan F project on YouTube. I will strongly and endlessly appreciate every single subscriber who will kindly subscribe and like and comment. So that is my I don't know why I called it a project, but I guess everything in a man's life is a project. You know, whatever you actively do turns into a project of yours. Yeah, and it's on Instagram. It's Myxomatosis, which is a little reference to one of the songs by Radiohead. It's M1XOMATOSIS.
Okay, I'm going to put the comment section as well. So, but look, it's early. You slept very little to come on podcast. So we forgive you. Like, guys, you know, don't take it seriously. You know what I mean? You know, spelling in 6 o'clock in the morning, guy, he wakes up 4 o'clock in the morning, which while most of you go to bed. Yes, please. So, guys, I'm going to put it. Comment
Thank
section.
you very much, Maria.
Bohdan details. I want you to contact him. I want you to call him. I want you to call him. I want you to contact him to be guest on your podcast. I want you to be guest on his podcast. Let's go make it.
I'm absolutely open to anybody. You know, whoever's got a nice story to share, something that's been life transformative. I'm down for it. I'm trying to reach out to craziest people all over the world, people who've witnessed something, different. I'm all about the story and experiences.
I think
That's why
you should give yourself credit. When I started my podcast, there was same thing. I was listening the other day, the big mouth, Gary V, who says, just go people, podcast, People don't come on a podcast. But that's not your issue. Because people who are on social media big mouth, I don't want to come podcast, again speaks the volume. But Bohdan, your podcast is good. That's like when I started talking to you last weekend, I was listening to something else with the other guy. I forgot his name again, and I couldn't stop laughing because that was such a good interview. Yeah, like
Probably
it was such
Eric,
a good interview. I was like, oh God, this guy it's good.
Yeah.
So Bohdan, look, thank you very much for being my guest on for last 1 hour on Live the Battlefield. Thank you for waking up so early. Thank you for sacrificing, your sleep to be my guest today. I truly wishing you every success and every blessing to you and your family, and to reach your dreams. Guys, I'm gonna again contact the Bohdan, give him support, thumbs, likes, share, subscribe, and let's go make a Bohdan podcast famous, and let's go give him support from the parts of the world where we don't need to wake up 3 o'clock in the morning and listening the whistling sound of the missiles. Live the Battlefield. Thank you, Bohdan, for being my guest.
Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you. Awesome.